On today's Technobabble, Basic Videography for your live stream, Part 3.
This is Tech No Babble, your weekly source for church video and graphics news, perspectives, tips, and tricks. And now here's your host, Paul Clifford.
Hi and welcome to another episode of Technobabble. This is the show where every week we talk all about using video and graphic design in the church. My name is Paul Allen Clifford. I'm your host. I'd love for you to ask your questions, by the way. So head on over to trinitydigitalmedia.com/contact and ask them there if you're listening to the audio. If you're watching the video either on YouTube or on trinitydigitalmedia.com, just leave a comment in the comment section below. That's what it's for. So let's get started talking about this. If, by the way, you haven't seen the previous two episodes or heard them, then by all means head on over to trinitydigitalmedia.com. Wow, I said that totally wrong. And find them there. I'll also put a link below the videos if you're watching them there, or in the show notes that come with the audio podcast. So there are a few more things that I want you to know about. First off, directing styles really matter. Now, it matters specifically for the audience that you're directing for. So since we're talking about live streaming, I want you to consider the limitations of a live stream. First off, the devices people watch them on. Now, it could be that people are watching on their televisions. Could be they're watching on tablets or notebook computers or even desktop computers. It could be that they're watching them on their phones. But either way, they're not watching them on huge screens the size of the screens at your church, most likely. They're probably watching them on something much smaller. So there's a tension that you've got to create between shots that provide context, wide shots, and close-up shots that provide detail. Now, if you do too many close-up shots, the viewer isn't going to feel like they're part of it. If you do too many wide shots, they're going to lose all sorts of detail. So I've seen this quite a lot, actually, where churches will have very wide shots, and that's it. They'll only have wide shots. And that's really unfortunate and really kind of annoying. Another thing that I've seen is kind of taking the IMAG feed, and that feed being very literal IMAG, never showing any establishing shots, any shots for context, and just using that for the live stream. That's no good either. So you need to balance the two. Additionally, there's a third kind of shot, what we call a reaction shot, which provides information about what's going on in the room that's not absolutely necessary for seeing what's going on, but it kind of brings you into the room. So you might have noticed sometimes you'll see video of a church and they'll have a shot of someone taking notes, or they'll have a shot of someone that the pastor's talking to. Not absolutely necessary, but it really brings you into the room to see those kinds of shots. But if you're in the situation where you're trying to take your IMAG feed, image magnification, and put that up on your main screen, that can be a problem, because even if people have been instructed not to look when they're put up on screen, if they can look, it's really hard not to. I keep thinking about, we had one of the guys that does stage direction, and the pastor was making a point about he and his wife, they're also in our marriage family ministry, And so the pastor was talking about them, and the guy did this. Now, if you're listening to the audio, you didn't get that, but what he did was he paid attention, he was really there, and then you could see him trying not to look at the screen, and then his eyes darted over and then back. He tried, and he knew not to do it, but it's really, really hard not to. Whenever I'm on screen, I feel the same way. You know, if the pastor walks out into the congregation, it's really hard not to look at yourself on the screen. I don't know why. Maybe it's vanity, maybe it's something wrong with me, but that's just the way that it is. So it would be better if those kinds of shots would go only to the live stream or only to your recording. So that's number one, directing styles. Number two, safety shots. This is something that I think the less experienced you are as a director, the more necessary safety shots are, but it tends to be the case that directors that aren't experienced don't have them. So let me give you an example. What I tend to do is when I'm directing, I have people always have a shot of someone who is the main person. So if we're doing worship, we should always have a shot of the worship leader. Because if there's a problem, I can always go to the shot of the worship leader. I don't have to tell people to go get it. I don't have to instruct which camera should go get it. It's just always there. Now that could be a varied shot. You know, it could be constantly pushing in or pulling out when the shot is not up, or it could switch between a close-up, a medium shot, a wide shot, etc. But it should also always include the worship leader. Same thing for the pastor. So if the pastor's preaching, perhaps in the moment the pastor's talking about someone in the audience, talking about the congregation as a whole, or something where you might want to get plenty of reaction shots, you should always have a shot of the pastor, though. Always. Because the moment the pastor references something or calls back or mentions scripture, something like that, you're going to want that shot. So it's great to always have that as an option. Finally, let's talk about in-service training. Most churches are not going to have professional camera people. Some are. If that's you, great, wonderful. But most of the time, not so much. So your camera people are lawyers, realtors, factory workers, stay-at-home moms, writers. They're just people that don't do this for a living. So I want you to consider doing in-service training. Having at least once every 3 months or so an opportunity for people to learn new things and get better. You see, the thing about learning is you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't know what you don't know, then you don't know how to ask, you don't know how to improve, you just, quite frankly, don't know these things. So I want you to consider that as a possibility that you should have some in-service training. Now, as it turns out, that's part of what I do is I create stuff that will help, resources that help churches to train their people. So most of it's free, like this video, this audio. So I'd love for you to subscribe, whether you do that on my newsletter by going to trinitydigitalmedia.com/gifts, and then you can pick out a gift and subscribe to the newsletter at the same time. Or if it's by subscribing to the YouTube channel or the podcast. Any of those are perfectly acceptable ways to do it, but I'd love for you to subscribe so that you can get all this new content every time that I release it, which is several times a week, quite frankly. So go ahead and do that. And I hope that you'll use that information to go out and change eternity. Until next time, this is Paul Allen Clifford with TrinityDigitalMedia.com.